Honda Pilot Ride Ready Radio presents Driving with Chris Berman.
Back, gone! Whoop!
It's good you have third row seating. You can put them back there, away from your ears.
Yep. Ride Ready, the new Pilot, only from Honda.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, back after a hiatus last week as the Celtics won their 17th title, and I was so excited about it that I didn't do a podcast. So my apologies. We're back this week. We're going to have my buddy JackO on a little bit later to talk about the Yankees and the Red Sox and the appalling Mike and the Mad Dog split that is being reported as a potential thing that might happen. So we got to, JackO and I have to talk through this one because we're two of the biggest Mike and the Mad Dog fans on the planet. But first, I wanted to have from the New York Post, formerly NBC, currently of NBA TV, one of my favorite writers ever, a big influence on me, Peter Vecsey. Welcome to the BS Report.
Appreciate you having me on.
This is
about time.
This is an absolute thrill for me because you're really one of my favorites growing up, and I used to the Hoop du Jour column I used to read when I was after my parents got divorced when I was living in Connecticut in the mid '80s, and you were like literally the only guy at that time who was even writing a column like that, right?
I was the first to have an NBA column as a specialist. Yeah, the first NBA column. I think it started when Murdoch hired me in the late '70s. Came over from the Daily News where I was covering, NBA and ABA, and as a beat writer. And then when Murdoch bought the paper, I was one of the first hires, and I was a specialist, and that was the first. Kind of like Peter Gammons being the first baseball columnist.
Right.
I'm not sure if his was before mine, but right around the same time, I would think.
And how many days a week were you writing back then?
Always 3.
Yeah. Tuesday.
It's changed because we didn't have a Saturday paper. We didn't have a Sunday paper back in those days.
Right.
One of the great reasons to go to the Post, I'd have my weekends off, and then they changed. So I mean, it's Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. It's been that since we've had a Sunday paper. So
when you started doing this information column, and one of the things I loved about it was you weren't afraid to take shots at GMs, at players, at other writers. What were the repercussions back then?
Same as they are now.
Yeah.
Bill, it's like when I first started doing the column, my whole idea was to be, informative, funny, and to take on anybody. Not just the 12th man on a team or the second assistant or, I felt that if to have some credibility, you had to be willing to take on anybody if you felt the need. So, I think that's where I've been successful is that people have seen that, I'm not afraid to take on, whether it's Michael Jordan or, a Brian Cardinal.
Right.
Not to pick on Brian, of course, because he's a tough guy. But
he's in the news this week.
Yeah, right. That's why I kind of mentioned him. But I, it's kind of worked for me. And also, what worked for me more than anything, Bill, is that I coached and played in the Rucker tournament in the 70s.
Yeah.
So all those guys that I played with and coached became, they were the stars of that era. And then and then a lot of them became coaches and stuff like that and moved on. And so it's that what I built in the Rucker in the early 70s. And then I came back in the mid 80s and did it again with a new group of guys. That carried me for probably 2 decades.
Well, and plus when you were writing back then, it was really an old boys network. Everybody looked out for each other. You were at least one of the first ones that I can remember who didn't mind taking a shot at a rival columnist or even somebody in your own paper. It was just kind of added a little energy to the column, and I always remember like reading it and thinking like, oh, I wonder if he's going to go after Lupica this week, and being like, yeah, it was just different than what was out there. And the other thing
You mean Pee Wee Berman, right?
The other thing that you did that I actually adopted in my own column was you had like column contributors, you called them. And I remember specifically that my favorite one was this guy, Frank Drucker.
Still with me.
Yeah, who always had these fantastic one-liners. And after a while, I began to feel like he was my friend, too. And it was one of the reasons when I started writing a column, I just started throwing my friends in there because, you know, it worked for you. And I just felt like, hey, if I feel like Frank Drucker's my friend, then, you know, who knows?
Yeah, no, I've always tried to give credit where credit's due. The truth of the matter is Frank gives me infinitely more lines than I give him credit for. He worked at the Post back when, and he's been at Yonkers Raceway forever. That's what he does for a living. And, you know, he should be writing for Leno, and probably would be if he wasn't such a good, so nice to his mother, who he's taken care of for many, many years. So he's kind of, you know, he's got time for only so much. But
yeah,
the man is pretty good.
Well, for God's sakes, the man should have a blog. He should at least be able to put this stuff down somewhere.
You know, but then I couldn't have it. So that's in our contract.
Oh, you have an exclusivity deal with it. That's pretty funny. Now, when you were doing this stuff in the 70s, the game was totally different. Like the reporters after games, you guys had steak with the players, you guys drank with them at the hotel bar, traveled with them. You know, you really knew these guys. And then over the last, I'd say really starting in like the early 90s, and now it's totally changed. Now it's like, you know, there's no access whatsoever. Has that kind of been sad for you to watch that change over the years?
Well, you know, I've got an expression I've used for many years that, you know, I talk about back then. I say those were the days, you know, and the nights weren't too shabby either. So we did more than eat steak with them. But I miss those days. I miss the accessibility. I think the league has made a huge mistake to allow teams to bar us from just about everything, to be able to, you know, I point, you being from Boston, I point to those years that I traveled with the Celtics on commercial flights, because there were no such thing as charters except for, you know, the Knicks chartered occasionally, and, you know, and then the Bulls later on, the Pistons. But, you know, that 86 team that I traveled 2 weeks with on the West Coast was the highlight of my career. And why? Because Casey Jones allowed me, you know, 100% freedom to be at their practices, to be included in their practices. I used to work out with the team, you know, play the players one-on-one, you know, go out to eat every night with Bird, Walton, Seasting, and Carlisle. That was our group. I mean, come on. Are you kidding? I was like, that was like, yeah, today? Yeah, could I do that today? I mean, yeah, I could probably do it. I really probably could if I had the time and the inclination to really push for it. But then there are times, and you know, you're not allowed at all. I remember when Larry Brown took over for the 1 year with the Knicks. Known Larry since high school. I watched him play against Artie Heyman, you know, Long Beach against Oceanside. Okay, and here he takes over the Knicks, and I asked for an interview down in Charleston. I want a couple hours interview, so I called the PR guy, asked him to set it up. The answer is no. The answer is no. I said, are you serious? You know, I mean, I still can't even believe it to this day. You know, it's like, you know, you're just ruining it for him. You know, whether it's his decision or yours, which I couldn't believe it was his. You know, although I've gotten on him over the years, he's the same man that, you know, allowed my son to be the ball boy of the 76ers during the finals against the Lakers, you know?
Right.
So to say no, you're killing it. You're killing it. I told my editor right then, I'm not going to Charleston. I'm not covering this team. I'm not going to games. I didn't go to a game. I might have gone to 2 games in the last 3 years, you know, at the Garden. So they want to play that. I don't have to. I don't need them.
Well, it does seem like the attitude, for the most part, is that we don't really need the media as much anymore because, you know, back when you were doing it, each newspaper might have had one reporter that covered the team, and that was it. You might have had 5 media members total traveling. You know, there wasn't Sports Center, all this stuff, so it was just a lot easier. Now I think they feel like they have a lot to lose, and that it's not really worth losing for them, and they just kind of shut everybody out. And you're even
You
seeing
mean
it
they have
now.
nothing to lose?
Well, you're even seeing it now with the way the media seats are set up at these games. Like, they bump pretty much everybody from the table around courtside, and people are shoved in the corners now. And I think eventually we're probably heading to an era where the media tables are in the second balcony, because they don't need
They definitely are. I mean, maybe not the local guys. You might have a few locals, that are always going to have their seats. But any out of town, even the visiting team, isn't going to be allowed up front. But again, for somebody who was the original columnist of the NBA, and then to go to, I remember the Spurs. I think it was the Spurs Pistons playoffs a few years ago. Might have been a different Spurs series, but anyway, I was up so far above the fray. I was above the rent problem, that's for sure. I was way up, and so I stayed there for the half of a game, and I went to my hotel and I checked out and I went back home to New York. And I told my editor, I said, there's absolutely no way that I am going to go to a game and sit where they put me. It's like I can do this better on TV.
Yeah.
I can do it better by not watching the games. And he said, you're right. And I told him then, I said, if I were the sports editor, I wouldn't even cover the league anymore. I'd pull my guys off. He said, they want to play that game, we can play that game. Ignore them.
Well, back when you started doing this, the newspaper accounts and the features, all that stuff were really valuable because, for somebody like me, especially like in the mid-'80s when, there was no DirecTV season pass package and I'm struggling for any Celtics information I can get. I couldn't go online, read anything. The stuff that inside access was really valuable, and I just wonder, now things have evolved and things have changed, and do we even really need to cover these teams like that anymore? It's all these prepackaged sound bites anyway, and you're not getting access.
I don't know what the answer is, Bill. It's like that Celtic team, to go out with Bird and to have him, be like Will Rogers after the games, tell story after story after story, and never ever telling me off the record. I came back and printed all these stories about how his problem with Kent Benson, what went on in Indiana, on and on. And I remember telling him one time, I said, I can't believe you've never said to me off the record. And he said, why would I care? He says, I don't read your crap. But that's Bird. I mean, that's Bird.
Yeah.
So I was able to give insight to Bird that nobody else had about his sense of humor, about his honesty, So I think the league, the teams, they really, really blow it by distancing themselves from the media. I understand in today's day and age, everybody's out looking for, a negative or sensational story.
Yeah.
I understand that, and but to me, you got to take your chances, and then if somebody really, really abuses the privilege of being around them and says something false, I'm not saying they print the truth. What are you going to do?
Man.
But if they're printing stuff that's completely erroneous, then you've got to, say no. Your access is ended. But on
the flip side, the league is in the best shape it's been in 15 years. Wouldn't you agree?
I have no idea. I don't know what teams are. I don't have privy to what teams are making. There are an awful lot of teams that don't seem to be drawing well.
Well, I'm talking from like a fan interest standpoint.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Are the ratings up? They were up in the championship series. I know that.
Right.
But at least that's what they tell us. But I don't know. If you read my emails, I don't know what your emails are like. Most of my emails have said they can't stand the league. So, it might be because of what happened with the Donaghy thing. It might be because of the Knicks being so terrible for so long, and and all that negativity around New York. But I mean, I can't tell you how many people say we totally tuned it out.
Well,
so why are you writing me? I said.
Well, but I think the New York thing, from your vantage point, is a huge thing. I think there's so many unhappy, disgruntled, just betrayed Knicks fans.
Yeah.
That probably affects what you're getting. I mean, were you covering the team back when they won the last title? Do you go back that far?
Yeah, I do. I was covering them part-time. I was in the ABA, covering the ABA up until then. I switched permanently the following year with a guy named Joe O'Day, who just died this past year, and he went to the Nets, and they won the championship with him, and he said he was the reason. I said, no, me not covering was the reason. But I covered them from '73, basically halfway, and then until I left to go to the Post.
So you've seen all the ups, all the downs, and now the nadir, the Isaiah Thomas era, which now is being followed by the Mike D'Antoni, Donnie Walsh era. It's unclear whether this is going to be, a major improvement, but at least it's a little more encouraging, I would think.
Yeah, there's no question, but they have a lot of work to do, and but it is encouraging just to see Isaiah, no longer in charge of all the craziness that's been going on. But I don't know if it's the nadir with him. I mean, it was really bad at other times.
Post Bernard, when Bernard blew out his knee?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when Hubie was there and they went downhill, and they got Bannister and Carnival, I used to call him. The Animal and Carnival were this starting front court.
Right.
But there have been some low points before. I mean, but
in the '70s they fell into that habit of they always seemed to either trade for or signed whoever the superstar was who hadn't been good for like 2 years.
Right. Yeah, whether it was McAdoo or Spencer Haywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, there'd always be that annual savior.
And then they kind of reenacted it in the late 90s, although it did work for the 99 finals, but I still consider that whole season to have an asterisk. But, they traded for Larry Johnson, Charles Smith. It was kind of like going down that same road, and then finally it bit them in the butt with some of the big contracts they handed out.
Yeah, but, I mean, when Riley was there, I mean, it couldn't have been better. I mean, there's no question that they were the team to be, right next to the Bulls. You'd have, that would be the place you'd want to be. But their downfall was not really the big contracts. I mean, all those guys you mentioned paid off to some extent.
Yeah.
And the downfall was trading Ewing when he demanded to be traded, and
right.
Trading him for a bunch of trash that they've been just trying to fight ever since. They've just made mistake after mistake.
It was really one of the 5 worst trades in NBA history. Like they gave up a guy who was just going to leave this enormous cap space on that. I think he was making like $20 million for that final year.
Yeah.
And instead of just letting him play it out, they traded him for all these terrible contracts. It was like $80 million worth of bad contracts.
Yeah, I mean, they had the Glenn Rice deal. They had a bunch of guys thrown in, but Glenn Rice was the worst. And then they turned Glenn Rice into let me get it, Shandon Anderson and
Howard
Michael Isley.
Yeah.
They wanted, but Bill, it's one of the things I try to point out to owners when I say, why aren't you asking me to be a GM? Is it's very easy for us to sit here, in 2008 and say the Ewing deal was one of the worst deals ever. I wrote it the day afterward. Mm-hmm. And tried to write and tried to explain to Checketts and Layden how bad that move was beforehand, because it just made no sense. Let the guy play it out, and then no, it wouldn't have put them under the cap, but it would have given them so much more flexibility in another year or so. Instead, they just.
Well, there was that weird 10-year stretch after kind of the cap came into what it eventually became to be, when teams, they didn't realize that you were actually better off having expiring contracts and having cap space. And like Jerry West was really the first person that figured it out when he cleared all that money that year in '96 for Shaq. But for some reason, people still thought, hey, it's better off to have these guys under contract. Even if it's Glenn Rice and Travis Knight and Luke Longley, like they just didn't get it. Now I think teams get it a little bit more than they did.
I might be wrong about this, but Jerry West had the benefit of dealing with Stu Jackson on that, and with Vancouver, so he was able to move. I can't bring the name.
Oh, you're right. He made it. That's right.
It was 2 guys. It was a guard and a forward. Who was it, man?
Yeah, you're right. He he basically dumped 2 contracts on him, and that gave him.
And that gave him exactly enough room. And the same Stu Jackson. I could be wrong. It might have been the guy before.
No, you're right. It was Stu Jackson.
It was Stu, and then the same guy that then trades gets Otis Thorpe and gives gives away the number 1 pick. It turned out to be the 2nd pick of the draft. The Jerry West. But now Jerry West gets screwed on the back end of that because he's now with Memphis, and so he can't draft Carmelo or Wade or Bosch or any of those guys. And had he gotten had it been the number 1 pick, he would have been safe. But anything below that, but that was Stu too.
Anthony Peeler, that's who it was.
It was Anthony Peeler and the kid from Carolina who played at Philly.
It's funny how every 10 years people just help out the Lakers. Because, they got Magic Johnson and James Worthy, basically. Who'd they give up? Don Ford and, a washed-up Gail Goodrich?
You've got good memory. It was Don Ford, the Cleveland, and that was the Worthy one. And actually, they had nothing to do with the Gail Goodrich one. That was in those days. It was the league deciding the compensation on what the Lakers should get.
Right.
When New Orleans signed Gail as a free agent.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yes. So they gave them 2 number 1 picks.
Ugh. Well, that wasn't as bad as
Joe Axelson. Joe Axelson was like the Stu Jackson of those days, and he would decide. He was the Kansas City GM that went to work for the league. He was the one, I believe, who decided that.
Well, that wasn't as bad as when Bill Walton went to, I think, San Diego. And they basically had to give up their entire team for him, and then he never played. Double whammy.
But he was going to go to law school. So.
That was a weird era for the NBA, that right after that merger when they had, you could sign a free agent, but you basically had to give up your entire team to get him. And, I don't know what was going on there.
Well, it was all to discourage teams from signing free agents, and then finally actual free agents became free agents. Then they jumped to that era, but there was a time there, and I'm not sure how long that was, that you got burned. It's like the Knicks signing Marvin Webster.
Yeah.
And it costing them Lonnie Shelton, which then wins the championship. His addition wins the championship for the Sonics the next year. So
well, you'd never see a trade like Parrish and McHale for Joe Barry-Carroll happen now because I do wonder
Well, I don't know about that now.
Well, to move up 2 spots and you give up Robert Parrish, who's 24 and who's averaging a 20-10 every season.
Yeah, but they weren't great with him, and his if you go back then, I remember I covered then, and his attitude was not what it was when it came to the Celtics, and stuff that he was known for later on in life, he was known for early in life too. Which I don't have to go into. And so, there was that. And then Joe Barry, Joe Barely Cares, who, came out and everyone thought he was God's gift to the world, and including himself. And
I was going to say that was a pivotal trade for you because that led to one of your greatest nicknames.
Yes, it did.
Although I still think John Hot Plate Williams was the best one ever.
That was pretty devastating, actually. I got accused by John's friends in L.A. I remember being out there and being accosted by his friends and saying my nicknaming him that caused his depression and he almost committed suicide, and you're the reason. I said, really?
Did they blame you for Willie Burton too? All right, I have a couple questions for you, and then I'll let you go because I know you're busy today. Were you the first guy to cross over from print to TV, or was that Will McDonough?
Oh, McDonough was definitely ahead of me.
So you're the first NBA guy to do it?
Yes.
And what was that like? Because I think it was initially you, Costas, and Pat Riley, right?
And Bob Ferry.
Bob Ferry, wow.
That was our 4. It was very difficult. I had a hard time with it. I had done some TV before. Bill, you probably don't know it, but I was the first guy to have a pregame show in the NBA.
Really?
Yeah, I started it. It was called Hoop du Jour, and it was in the 70s. And it was the 70s. I'm not going to take that back. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it was CBS had it, and so I came up with the idea, and I got Hubie Brown to do it with me. and we shot a pilot, Earl Monroe, Mike Breen, and Hubie Brown and myself, and they bought it. So we sold it to the affiliates, CBS affiliates, about 77%. I say about because I know it was 77%. Of the affiliates bought it, and they would put it on either pregame to the CBS game, or sometimes they would put it on at night in a different time. It was weird. And that we did 10 of them. And I would go out and do interviews and with people, come back, and Hubie and I would argue and do a whole week's thing. So anyway, we had a second-year pickup for it. Huge amount of money for us at the time. It was a couple $1 million. We were going to do it the second year, and the guy whose name is going to escape me, no, it's not, Chet Forty.
Oh, yeah.
Chet Forty was our producer, and he was in charge of the money, and he gambled it away. And we hardly got paid. Nobody got paid. We got canceled. And that's when CBS began its pregame. They just said, well, what the hell? We'll do it.
God, that's like a sports documentary.
I'm serious. It was like that, it really, that's the way it happened. And
well, that guy, I remember there was like a 10,000-word Sports Illustrated feature about his gambling problem way back in the day.
One of the all-time lowlifes, and I don't mind saying that because he's dead now, because I said it to him to his face many times, because he really cost me a lot of money. And
was Hubie talking in the second person back then? Or was that something that developed in the 80s?
Hubie, man, he's one of my favorites. We had a great thing because we did get into it, and we really did, and because I covered him, and he's the one who nicknamed me the Viper, and it was like that wasn't meant as an endearing term.
You killed him in the 80s with the Darryl Walker teams.
Yes, no. So, but here we are. So we're doing this show together. It was incredible. But anyway, so that was, I had that TV background coming in, but it was still hard with NBC. It was. They never helped you at all. It was just go on, relax. Just go on and relax.
The one thing I do remember was that Riley was much better than I thought he was going to be. And in fact, I think he's one of the better NBA TV guys that we've had. And he only did it for like 2 years.
He did it for 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
And I'll dispute that with you.
Really? Okay.
No, he was not good at all. In fact, I'll give you something.
I liked him.
Well, I'll give you. You were young. I'll give you something. The Ebersol called him in and told him that, had he not gotten the Knicks job after that, he told him he was probably going to fire him because he wasn't giving it up.
Ah.
He was not giving it up because he was looking ahead to be a coach, and he just wasn't giving it up. At the same time, I will tell you that when I lost it on TV live during the finals that year and couldn't remember what I was supposed to say regarding a trade, he was the one who came to my rescue. Whereas everybody else was just like sitting around.
You had a brain freeze?
Yep.
We got to put that on YouTube.
It happens. Yeah, but I will give it to him. He came to my rescue. He saved me. And
how many years did you do NBC? 4 or 5? A couple?
They had it 12, and I did all 12.
You did all 12?
Yeah.
Well, I remember by the last year, I don't even think they had a halftime show. I think they were the first network that ever just gave up because they had changed the cast so much. They finally just said, "Ask for this. We'll save the money in futures."
No, that's not true. But at the end,
it is true. The 2000 finals, they did not have a halftime show.
No, that's not true. They actually used TNT's cast for halftime.
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah, they didn't. Yeah. They rented another cast. I think.
No, it was unbelievable, and so we didn't end on good terms. There's no question. There are so many things that went into that at the end. But I worked 12 years, and, that Sacramento game, that one that was, so talked about recently, I didn't do that game. We were doing those out of the studio. But I did do Game 7, halftime out of the studio with Tom Tolbert. And that was probably the last time I was on for them. I didn't do the finals. I was there, but I didn't work. They would bring in Barkley and Kenny Smith, which was so funny to me because for years Ebersol would be telling me, I don't want you to be funny. We're not supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
Be serious, And then as soon as Barkley was allowed to get away with his nonsense, Ebersol said, you know what? We got to have that. Let's bring them in and let's have them do what they do. But you've been telling me for years you don't want any of that. But,
well, I got to say, I love you and I love Barkley, so the fact that you guys have feuded publicly really made me feel like a kid in a divorce who had to choose between the parents. It was terrible. I was traumatized. I finally ended up not choosing between either of you, just kind of pretending it wasn't happening.
No, we've been feuding since when I was at USA Today in the early '90s. We were feuding in the paper. I'd be staying at my place, the Camelback in Arizona, which I'd stay there so many times. I would kill him in the paper in USA Today. He would respond in the Arizona paper, and my waiter, in the morning, used to bring me breakfast with the paper and said, "Yeah, he got you again today in the Arizona paper."
Wow. Well, he's kind of like Doc Rivers in the respect that everybody loved Barkley, so the fact that anybody was criticizing him in any way, he probably just couldn't believe it. Well, actually, no, he was getting criticized by one guy in Philly, I think, too.
Yeah,
was it Howard Eskin? One of those guys.
No, I think Howard Eskin him a tight. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you're right. No, somebody else, but yeah.
I think he's taken his shots from a lot of different areas. I'm the most consistent, that's all.
Hey, when you worked on NBC, you really worked with, God bless Julius Erving, one of my favorite players of all time, but holy mackerel was he bad on TV.
Yes, he was.
And then Isaiah in the early years, really one of the worst we've ever seen. And then Magic, who
I didn't work with Magic because he was on.
Oh yeah, he was doing the games.
He was doing games, but it's John Sally and Quinn Buckner.
It changed every year. It was like every year it was you and three other guys.
Sally was the most unbelievable of all, though, because I remember them telling him one week, John, the boss came. It wasn't Ebersol, it was the producer, Ricky Diamond. He came in and he said, "John, we're really going to have to get you to work a little harder. You got to come in more prepared. We want you to make some phone calls before we go on." And John looked at him and he goes, "Man," he says, "you don't pay me enough to make phone calls." It was like one of the. So from then on, we were calling him Long Gone Sally.
Oh, that's funny.
And he was fired, at the end of the year.
Wow, I mean, he seems like he has such a great work ethic on the Best Damn Sports
Show. Right.
I'm so surprised by that. What's weird, though, is that Magic is actually, I think, pretty good now on TNT as part of that foursome. He makes his points relatively concisely, and he has interesting things to say.
Yeah,
but it took like 15 years for him to get there.
Well, not as good as his talk show, but, pretty close to it. And I love the way he goes. So, Magic, what do you think about the Lakers? Well, I think we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And yeah. Sorry, right, Bill. I'm not with you on that one either.
All right, second question. Dr. J, does it bother you, because you followed this league for so long, and there's this constant rush to anoint whoever the next guy is as the guy, and, he's better than him. We saw it this spring with Kobe. People are so anxious to turn him into the next Jordan. Does it bug you that we just forget these guys, these great guys like Dr. J in the 70s and Bird and Jordan and Magic in the 80s and 90s, and people just seem to want to just move on to the next guy?
Well, it doesn't bug me. I understand how it works. Most people think the league began with Magic, Bird, and Jordan, or maybe just when Jordan started to assert himself. But there was a league before that. I thought it was interesting that when Julius was asked to pick his top 5 of all time recently, and in some newspaper, maybe the LA Times or USA Today or wherever it was, he picked all 5 from the previous era.
Really?
Yeah, he picked Magic. I'm sorry, he picked Oscar. He picked Wilt. He picked Russell. He picked I think West and Baylor. It was like I understand what you're saying. You're not even gonna give the next crew their props, and so he didn't have to worry about himself not being included in that. But
he didn't put Bird on there, huh? Bird was on his way to a 60-point game before they got in a fight that time.
Yeah.
I went to that game.
Yeah. No. So yeah, he's not going to give Bird his, and so Brent Barry and John Barry asked me recently, where their father would have fit in on, and I told them, my initial reaction was top 10, and then I thought, well, no, not top 10, top 15. And then, but I told them top 10, and they looked at me and they go, are you crazy? My dad. I said, your father was every bit as good as Larry Bird, every bit as good as him, and you should look up. I know he was a great scorer, but he averaged 12 rebounds a game in one season, while averaging 35 points, and he hurt his knee. I believe that was his second year. I said he was fantastic. Nobody, who would know? He's a top 50 player, but who would know how good Rick Barrier was? So, you could put Julius top 20 of all time. That's fine with me. Top 20. That's pretty damn good.
I gotta say, the one thing with Julius, and I know he's your guy, but he did get outplayed in a couple playoffs. Like Bobby Gross kind of held him to a standstill. Bobby Dandridge outplayed him one year. Bird outplayed him one year. And I think Jamal Wilkes kind of gave it to him in the 80 finals a little bit. It's a little bit of a stain on the resume if you're looking like top 10, top 15.
First of all, he's not my guy. But second of all...
he's your guy. You could admit it.
No, he's really not. But, you're hallucinating with the Gross and the Dandridge stuff. The Wilkes thing, that Game 6 was, one of the all-time lowlights of Philadelphia's career, sports career, too. To have Magic come in and do what he did, Wilkes did what he did. And, but to think that Gross did anything against Julius, nah.
Kind of a stalemate, though.
Nah.
Not giving that one to me?
No, not at all. I mean, that was the 77 when, George McGinnis was having a terrible series. Doug Collins, everybody gives him a free ride on that series. He totally was a disappointment. And
Will be Free?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, Free was,
it's a weird team.
Tough team to play with so many scores. But, Gross moved without the ball and did what, layups. And Julius's defense was, we were never going to say he was a great defensive player. But, Bobby Gross really had very little to do with that series. It was Walton and a team that only shot layups, basically. Maurice Lucas asserting himself after the fight with Dawkins and taking Dawkins out of it by shaking hands with him in Game 3 and just totally unnerving him. And so anyway, and Dandridge, smart ball players would give Julius a hard time because they move without the ball, but.
Do you think, Julius's ABA career is kind of taken on this mythical tone because there's no video. So it's only like word of mouth and stories and anecdotes. And
what do you mean there's no video?
Well, there's like 3 or 4 games from that era that you see on NBA TV, and that's it. But like day to day, just seeing him dunk on guys, like there's no ABA Dr. J montage on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like
really?
They basically.
See, I don't know that. I would think there'd be a whole lot of it. I mean, CBS again had the ABA in those days.
Did they really? What year was that?
When Jack Dolph took over, he was the head of CBS Sports, and he got them a contract with CBS, so they were on. And so there's got to be footage somewhere, unless they just dumped it. But
I remember that something happened. I'm almost positive like they lost a lot of the games that they would have had because like if NBA TV shows all of these games and. For the ABA, they only have like 3 games. One of which, thank God, is the St. Louis Spirits with Marvin Barnes and that whole crazy team.
Right.
But
Paul Hersheimer, our guy, would know about that. But I've seen stuff. I don't know. But to answer your question, mythical. For those who didn't see him, they might think that it's mythical. It really didn't happen. That he was overblown.
No, I don't mean mythical. I mean just like it's one of those things, like he lives on in these anecdotes and stories from my dad and people like that. And
Bill, everything you heard, seriously, everything you heard and everything you have witnessed. I mean, you could quadruple it, you could square it, you could do all sorts of things to it. It was to watch him play in the Rucker League and then in the ABA, where he had total freedom. Was something that I'll remember my whole life, seeing him things improvise in midair, 5-6 times a game with guys hanging on him and him throwing in stuff, he was Jordan. I remember when Jordan came, and Julius got angry at me for this, but when I saw Jordan his first or second year, maybe his first year, and I said, Julius, he's you with a jump shot.
Uh-oh.
And I didn't care. I mean, I really felt that this guy could do what you did, only he's going back further. Now Julius had a jump shot, but it was like a methodical type of it wasn't you couldn't create your own type of thing, but everything in those days in the ABA was to the hoop, and he had 4 guys on him, and he would come up with something. It was unbelievable to watch.
Would you say him and Pearl were the two you had to be their guys of that generation?
Well, Maravich was certainly right there. Yeah.
So those 3.
Those 3, and there were other guys. I mean, you mentioned the Spirits. Anybody who saw Fly Williams play was like, are you serious? What was that? Connie Hawkins, same thing.
Yeah.
More than just 3. There were more.
All right, last question. Greatest team of all time. At gunpoint, if you had to pick one.
86 Celtics.
Nice. Thank you.
No question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I still think, they had one weakness, is that against really athletic teams, like the Blazers beat them in the Garden that year. They were a little
What, the one time they lost?
Well, I'm saying in a one-game situation, they were susceptible to that high-flying athletic team, but over a 7-game series, nobody was going to beat that team. They just had too many weapons and too many different looks they could throw.
Oh man, that team was just so loaded. I could name every player on that team. They all went to have pretty damn good years. Sam Vincent was a rookie on that team.
Right.
And
well, nobody's ever had anything like Walton coming off the bench. For whatever reason, miraculously was healthy for that whole season.
Right.
I don't know how that happened, or I'll never figure it out, but it happened.
So sixth man is Bill Walton, and,
right.
he's playing every game.
20 minutes a game.
That ain't bad.
Well, and then they had the thing where occasionally they would throw Bird at shooting guard, and they'd play Maxwell, Walton, Parrish, Bird at shooting guard, and DJ, and teams would be like, "What the hell's going on right now? How do we stop this?"
It was great. And DJ, I hope you do your part in pushing for him for the Hall of Fame.
I wrote it when he died. There's nothing worse than these guys that should have had their day. And they die, and now he's going to make it 5 years from now, but he's not going to see it. So
very sad. I mean, I don't know. I've been pushing it from day one. Maybe an endorsement for me is an indictment, but I don't get it. Of all the guys, and no, not of all the guys. You mentioned Wilkes. How can Wilkes not be in the Hall of Fame? I mean,
how does Dumars make it, but DJ doesn't make it?
Right. Well, I'm not going to indict one.
No, but I mean, if you're going to have Dumars, then you have to have DJ. You can't.
I know
have
how
one
he
not
made
there.
it. He's political. He's got his people, and and they push for him, and that's fine. But the DJ and Wilkes won college. He won in the pros. He won with the Warriors. He won Rookie of the Year. He wins with the Lakers. I mean, what the hell do you have to do?
Are you involved in Hall of Fame? Are you involved in Hall of Fame or no?
No.
Do we know who's involved?
No.
It's just this arbitrary, they just trot out the list every year?
Yes.
Yeah. See, I want to tear that place down. Good. It's going to be one of my goals for this next decade.
Well, send me that column.
All right, thank you so much. And I told you this last year, but I'll tell you again, you're a great influence on me, and I really appreciate everything you did.
Well, I like hearing that. I appreciate it, Bill.
I love having you on. Hope to have you on again.
All right, take care.
All right, take care.
Bye.
All right, now we've reached the time in the show when we call my buddy JackO at work for a segment we like to call Johnny, Are You Worried Yet? Where I ask him about his favorite team, the New York Yankees, and see how worried he is. Also, I saw JackO in Boston. We had a night out a couple weeks ago, so maybe we'll talk about that, some of the highlights. It ended with one of us in jail. I won't tell which one. But let's give him a ring.
Complex Litigation, this is John.
Johnny.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
I'm not even asking if you're worried yet anymore because the Yankees season is basically dead.
Wow. Dead when they're, 4 in the loss column out?
No,
dead?
They're not. I am getting. They're showing a little rejuvenation. You know what the key to it was when the Giambi mustache.
It really was. I'm thinking about growing one actually as well in solidarity with the mustache.
I don't know if everyone in America has seen his mustache, but It's breathtaking in HD. It really
phenomenal.
is. Breathtaking might not even be a strong enough word. It's
what
beautiful.
they showed on ESPN the other day was that it got darker from one day to the next. I think he put like a little Grecian formula or something in the old mustache or dyed it to make it darker.
I noticed that. In fact, I noticed it yesterday when I was watching them, and it almost looked like it was like penciled in or colored in or something.
Now
like it was like in a bad movie.
He's added like the soul patch thing too. It's really like a kind of a General Custer look. It's good for him.
I'll tell you, we might remember 2008 as the year that Giambino made his triumphant return as one of the greats of baseball history.
Came back. I don't know if it was the Gold Tiger song, or the mustache, but he's got a lot of things working for him right now.
He's on pace for 40 homers. He's got like a 400 on base. He's been kind of the key to the team. He kind of seems like he's the emotional fulcrum of the team, too.
He really,
throw that out.
He's come back, and Johnny Damon's come back huge. Although Johnny Damon now has a foot injury, which will probably render him out for the rest of the year. But,
I know. I was waiting for the Johnny Damon injury for like a month.
Yeah, and sadly it came true because he was on fire. I mean, 6 for 6, and
right.
amazing at bats. So he's been a huge key for them.
Yeah, I think the concussion he got in the 2003 playoffs has finally worn off. Took 5 years.
The was finally gone. Yeah.
He had it for 5 years. It was the longest anybody's had it.
The troubling thing is you couldn't call me last week in the midst of a 7-game win streak. You call me after they lose 2 out of 3 to the freaking Cincinnati Reds and get murdered by the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Hey, that Pirates team is tough. I know we didn't have a podcast last week, or else I don't want you to think I was ducking you.
It's all right. You had Celtics. It was all about the NBA and the Celtics. I can understand that.
Well, we tried to do, when I was in Boston the last time, we tried to do one where I did it from my hotel room.
Yeah.
And it sounded like I was the one who was calling in. It just sounded bad. So
really?
We decided to scrap it. All right, so you lost, since we last talked, lost Wong for the whole, basically until September.
Pretty much, yeah.
The guy ran the bases once, and he broke his foot in 19 spots, or what happened to him?
Yeah, that's exactly right. He had some hideous dislocation of his foot or something, and tore some ligaments or tendons in the process. And the miraculous thing is that, although Hank liked to blame it on running the bases, and we can talk about that, but it didn't happen when he was stepping on a base, apparently. It happened when he was on the grass between third and home. Now, I think it's idiotic that baseball has 2 different rules for 2 different leagues. It's the dumbest thing in sports. It's allowed to go on for 35 years.
It would be like the NBA if the Western Conference had 12-foot rims.
Right. We always talk about this, like in the Super Bowl, if you couldn't use a running back, because one league didn't use running backs. I mean, it doesn't make any sense
or
at
no
all.
tight ends.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. If Arlen Specter wants to investigate sports, that's something he should be out investigating.
I agree.
But the guy's a professional athlete making millions of dollars a year. I would hope that he could run, between third base and home plate without being on the disabled list for the rest of the year. I mean, don't they run in exercise in their off days?
I have to say, it's amazing that Wong could not run the bases. He really had to run 360 feet, and he tears every muscle in his foot.
I know, it's ridiculous. And, meanwhile, someone like Johan Santana has played in the American League his whole year, goes over to the National League, hits on a regular basis, and, somehow is not rendered on the disabled list. So, yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. It's stupid.
The whole interleague thing to me is we used to call in college a great hologram.
Yeah.
I get the USA Today, I'm trying to read the box scores, it's I'm trying to follow my American League fantasy guys, and I have to read each box score because it's only one team in each game.
Well, the thing I don't understand is it used to be that the teams would play their traditional rivals or whatever it's called, like the Yankees would play the Mets, and then an entire division would play another division.
Yep.
And yet, for some reason, last week the Yankees were playing the San Diego Padres. After having gone through everybody in the Central, or playing in the midst of playing everybody in the Central, they're playing the Padres. Now, why did they play the Padres? And the Red Sox are playing the Diamondbacks right now. So the Red Sox and the Yankees are competing for the same American League East crown, theoretically, and yet it's by facing different competition.
It's inexplicable.
I mean, it was to the benefit of the Yankees in this case, so I shouldn't be complaining about it because I'd much rather play the Padres than the Diamondbacks.
Right.
But even so, it just doesn't make any sense. So if one team ends up 3 games better than the other, well, they're 3 games better, but it's not really a fair judge because they haven't played the same teams.
I'm with you, Johnny. I don't understand.
I don't get it. Why did they just throw a random National League West team in there? Was America we couldn't wait for that Yankees Padres matchup?
I think it's
1988 World Series replay.
I think it's because they want the teams in the National League or whatever to.
Everybody wants the Yankees and the Red Sox in their park.
And they're trying to make it fair.
Right.
Or like, everybody wants the Cubs.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got like these teams that are guaranteed gates. But if you're going to think that way, just give everybody more money and scrap it, because I just think the division should go against the other divisions. I'm fine with that. It should be AL East against the NL East and on down the line. But I have no idea why the AL East should be playing the NL West.
And at least you could have some traditional rivalries there, because all the cities are kind of located near each other. So you have like New York, Philly, or Boston, Philly is somewhat of a natural rivalry, kind of, But
Tampa Bay, Washington.
Exactly. But now you have even Mets, Mariners. There's a historic battle. Boy, America's been waiting for.
I know. I finally got the DirecTV package going in my office, and just going through these games, I'm trying to figure out which game I want to toggle the Red Sox game with, and Mets, Mariners, Indians, Rockies, Royals, Astros. Just these weird combinations. Like, who would want to watch? I forget who the Royals were playing. I think the Royals Giants. Which I ended up watching because the Royals came back from 10 down on Sunday, but Royals Giants.
That's
why?
It's like a category of World Series you will never see in your lifetime. Now's your chance. Royals Giants.
I watched that kid Lincecum pitch.
He's good.
And, he makes some weird faces, though. I'm going to lock out on him, Johnny.
You're not a fan of the faces?
I think his faces are too weird. I don't see somebody becoming one of the dominant pitchers of his generation that makes that many weird faces.
All right.
I don't know if you've seen him.
I actually never have seen him. I just have heard
it was a little jarring.
Stats, but I don't know if I've ever actually seen a highlight of him. Now I'm intrigued.
He looks like he's about, I'm not kidding, 12 years old.
Now I have to go and search for Royals Giants highlights that I just made fun of. See that?
Well, you're going to have to wait another 5 years.
Damn it.
For that Royals Giants.
I might buy tickets to the next series, actually.
I've been watching the Royals lately because in both of my fantasy teams, we picked up this guy named Mike Aviles.
Okay.
Who is a shortstop. They had this guy, Tony Pena Jr., who I'm not kidding, was hitting 110.
Yeah.
And they just kept throwing him out there so he'd go for 4. And meanwhile, they had this guy in AAA who was their minor league player of the year, and he had huge offensive stats in minor. So they called him up. I picked him up in both leagues. And he's kind of my non-Red Sox guy right now.
He's your guy?
Mike Aviles. Yeah, I'm into him.
Tony Pena Jr., every time the Yankees played the Royals and he was on their team, and it would talk about how hard it was for Tony Pena Sr., the Yankees' first base coach,
right?
And how when they would go over the scouting reports for the opposing hitters, Tony Pena Sr. would leave the room because he didn't want to be involved with the analysis of his son. But It sounds like he really didn't want to be there when every scout was like, "He sucks, throw him anything." Throw it underhand. He couldn't hit a softball.
Well, you've accomplished something when you've made Tony Pena Sr. not the worst hitting Tony Pena in the history of the Tony Pena family. Because, oh my God, I think he had 200 for 5 straight years.
That's right.
So how you
But he
feeling
was the guy who caught while sitting down on the ground, basically. No one ever picked up on. No one else ever did that after him.
You're right, and it increased his coolness quotient by 5 times for some reason. And then when the Red Sox got him, I remember being, oh, that's the guy who catches with his leg down.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I had to watch him hit for the next 4 or 5 years. How did you spend Jerry Remy Day yesterday?
I completely forgot that it was Jerry Remy Day. I did see that online.
There was some fantastic moments. For instance, inexplicably, Renee Russo called in.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't even think she really knew Jerry that well, and she was nervous.
Really?
It was like Jerry was a much bigger celebrity than her.
Wow.
And they had a awkward. Well, first of all, there's never been a baseball in-game booth conversation with a random third person that wasn't completely awkward.
True.
It's never been pulled off. But so that was weird. And then they brought that guy back who I literally had blocked out of my mind, Bob Kurtz, the guy who was before Don Orsillo.
Oh, there was a guy between Sean McDonough and Don Orsillo?
Well, initially it was Sean McDonough was on 38 and Bob Kurtz was on Nesson.
Oh, okay.
And Bob Kurtz was the worst play-by-play guy who ever lived. It was he was. I remember I wrote in a column that he was like the cab driver in Total Recall, with the robot. That's how you describe his play. But so anyway, he came in for an anti-lively, awkward discussion. The whole thing was just bizarre. Meanwhile, there's this exciting game going on. Like, hey, it's Lenny Clark. And I'm like, hey, we're down 4-1. Can I watch the comeback?
Did they bring back Tina Servacio?
No, they didn't.
They did not.
They didn't. She's touring.
She is.
She's touring. She's touring with Theocracy. What do you think of the new Nesson ladies?
You know, I haven't really Heidi Watney. I haven't seen her work on Red Sox games. I did see her interview, I forget who it was, Donnie Marshall or somebody about the Celtics. I saw some of her Celtics work, but not her Red Sox work.
I like it. I give her a thumbs up.
You do, really?
Yeah.
She was all right on the Celtics thing that I saw. Yeah, I haven't seen her like in the stands though, throwing some taped interview with Jonathan Papelbon yet, but I look forward to that.
Let's talk about the big story because really America is on edge, and I'm on edge. You're on edge. We're all discombobulated.
True.
It looks like Mike and the Mad Dog might be splitting up.
Yeah, although Mad Dog claims that those rumors were overblown, and that's not the case. I read in the paper that he said that they were fighting like dogs up until May, fighting like cats and dogs. I'm sorry, like up until May, but that they've gotten along a lot better lately.
What?
I read about it online though. Like it said, there's a potential that they may have done their last show together, and happily and luckily for me, my parents remain happily married and always have been. But I think this is probably the closest to what it must feel like when your parents say we're getting a divorce.
Yeah, well,
I read Mike and the Mad Dog were going to split.
I've had parents go through a divorce, and I can back that up. It is just as traumatizing.
I thought to myself, and I'm like, who would I listen to? Would I listen to Mike, or would I go to some other channel for the Mad Dog? It was really a painful decision to have to contemplate.
Do you think it's going to be like one of those celebrity marriages where they break up for like a year, but then they get back together?
I think so, because it's in their own vested interest. I can't see either one of them. Well, first of all, neither one of them can ever work with another partner again, because it would be so odd and awkward. Yeah. It just wouldn't work. And I don't think either one of them can be off on their own because they need some foil to play off of. So I would think that after like a separation, maybe like a Pam Anderson, Tommy Lee type thing.
Yeah, maybe there would be like a Pam Anderson, Tommy Lee, like get back together a bunch of times. I was a little disappointed in them because
there's a sex tape with Mike and the Mad Dog.
I was a little disappointed in them last month because they had Bob Ryan on.
Yes, on a personal level.
Who was misrepresenting a column I had written, and neither Mike or Mad Dog had read the column, but just kind of piled on with Bob Ryan about it. So I sent them a very nice email saying, hey, guys, obviously they know I love the show.
Sure.
They know, I grew up loving the show. And, I was just like, hey, read the column before blah, blah, blah. And then Mike was like, he's thin-skinned. He's got a glass jaw. He can't handle the criticism.
God.
It's like, really, you guys are like that elitist? Like, you just, I don't know. I was disappointed in Mike. I'll get over it.
All three of them, Bob Ryan and Mike the Mad Dog, ought to look up a word in the dictionary called sarcasm. But they might want to familiarize themselves with that.
It was pretty clear, like, I was having fun.
And you were writing it completely from, like, a fan's standpoint, like to say, like, the Lakers are never our rival. The same thing Yankee fans would say about Red Sox. What worries me about them what worries about them going forward, or worries me about them, is that I hope they don't turn into one of those old boys network radio shows where, like, they have on the same guys who are, like, from the age 50 to 75, like kind of what Carson was like in his last 5-6 years. Right. And he still had all the same comics that were funny from his generation on. Yeah. And yet would never have had Eddie Murphy on. So I hope that doesn't happen. This is the way things work, though. I mean, that's like the constant battle today now, and that, like, everybody's afraid of the internet, and you write on the internet or whatever, like that's the Buzz Bissinger thing, all that, that's like all the old newspaper old time guys are all worried about the upstarts, and to some degree, Mike and the Mad Dog are going to side with the old style, the old school ones, because that's their generation,
I do think it's funny that, like, how they don't understand, like, the whole internet era. Like, they think anybody who writes on the internet is a blogger.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that whole generation of guys, they always call me like, well, he's a blogger. Well, he's a blogger. It's like, I've never had a blog. I've written columns from day one. Like, a blog is something you update 10 times a day.
Right.
You post as many posts as you can. I don't write a blog. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing, but I've always written columns.
A blogger, to some degree, is kind of like an independent movie. Like, you're like an indie, like you're against the system. You're out there like, the old joke in your parents' basement. But it's like a startup thing on your own. It's maybe just this underground thing, and you're not really paid by anybody unless you get advertisers.
Right.
You are a real journalist writing real columns that happens to be on the internet.
I am not a real journalist.
Not a real journalist. You're a
I
writer.
will say, though, that I have written not one, not two, but probably like 7 or 8 columns in my mom's basement. I'm not even kidding. In fact, I did a Super Bowl 99 diary in my mom's basement. And I think I wrote something after the Pats. So I always anytime they play the mom's basement card, I'm always like, hey, I wrote columns in my mom's basement.
Yeah, right. So.
But, it's just here's the thing. There's a million ways to write about sports, and there's room for everybody and different opinions. And, the blogosphere is figuring out. I think they've gotten a lot better over the last year from accountability and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But to just dismiss them and assume that everybody does the same thing, and I don't get that.
Right. And you weren't, you're not writing about so-and-so got drunk at some party or something or whatever. That's not, as the internet is known to do, like a Perez Hilton thing or whatever, That's not
what's sad is when I was out after the Celtics championship game, everybody's taking pictures of everybody, and I'm consciously trying not to be in any pictures.
Right.
I just picture God only knows what. It's a weird era.
It is, yeah.
I mean, it's definitely interesting, and I think there's a lot of funny elements to it, but at the same time, it's a little big brothery to me.
When you and I were out, you and I got together with it since the last podcast.
Oh, yeah, in Boston.
We went out in the town. And
we had an unplugged podcast. So how do you see this Mike and the Mad Dog thing playing out?
Well, I just think there's too much money involved, and there's too much of a vested interest for both of them to make it work. So for 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, I think you can, with actually 40 million commercial breaks, I think they can work through it. They've always had a kind of a frosty relationship for 25 years, or 20 years, or how long they've been on the air.
Do you let's reenact the conciliatory phone call. Do you want to be Mike or Doc?
You make the call. It doesn't matter to me.
I like to be Mike.
All right.
Do you want to call me, or do you want me to have you call you?
I think you should call me.
All right.
No, that wouldn't be a Francesa move. I'll call you.
Yeah, you call me. All right. Ring.
Well, I'm calling you. You have to say hello. You pick it up.
Oh, yeah. Hello.
Mike, a lot of mistakes are made there. We got to work it out there, buddy. What do you say?
Hey, dog. I think we're both making a huge mistake.
Bad job by us, Mike. Bad job.
We got a good thing going here, dog.
Great thing, Mike. Great.
This is I don't want to kill you or anything, but this is a humongous mistake on both of our parts.
We were killing each other there, Mike. Killing each other.
We got to get along.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of money at stake.
A huge amount.
All right, people get the idea. Thank you. That was fun.
Good stuff. Thank you. That was Sports Guy Theater. Thank you.
I wrote about this a couple years ago, but it was a true story. We listened to them all the way down to the Jersey Shore one time and then talked like them for the rest of the weekend, and neither of us hooked up.
No, we didn't meet any girls, amazingly.
Yeah. It's weird when you talk like Mike and the Mad Dog when you're out at bars and parties. Girls not really responding.
I'd go so far as to say repulses girls. Yeah.
Girls not gravitating.
No. Not attracting, sir. Not attracting. No.
I do think it goes to show you how important chemistry is with radio, because separately, I like Mike, I like Dog.
Right.
But together, the sum of the parts exceeded the whole, or whatever that phrase is that I always get wrong. The whole exceeded the sum of the parts, or is it the sum of the parts exceed the whole?
I'm not sure.
Whatever it is.
Works.
You know what I mean.
6 of one, half dozen of the other, or something like that, yeah.
And it's just hard for me to... Well, what would be really weird is if they split and then both of them had different partners.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I don't think it would ever work.
It would be like if my dad and my mom had gotten divorced and then they remarried. Oh, wait, they did. And that was weird for about 3 years. But do you think, I used to yell at my stepdad, you're not my father? Do you think we'll do that with, Mike's new partner?
Oh,
you're
definitely.
Not the Mad Dog?
Everybody's going to call in and they'll be like, yeah, it was much better with the Mad Dog instead of, the angry cat or whatever the next guy is, Yeah, definitely. That would definitely not work.
Are people talking about it on the Fan?
You know what, by the time I get out of work at 5:15, I think that because the story was in the morning paper, they probably covered it right at 1 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And then I read in the paper that Mad Dog addressed it, and he said, those rumors were way overblown and that they were really fighting and not getting along, and that's probably where the people got the ideas from that leaked it, but that he said they've been getting along fine since May, and there was no truth to the rumor that they were breaking up.
What do you think they fight about?
Well,
I was thinking about that the other day. Do they fight because, hey, dog, where's my last Diet Coke? And, like, that leads to, like, a 15-minute blowout. Like, what could they possibly fight about? Like, what topics they're talking about? Or?
Yeah, it probably comes, I think that they both have, like, a huge ego. So, like, if one of them's leaving early for something else, the other guy probably gets his nose out of joint. And it could be that type of thing, you know. Like, if somebody's dog leaves early to be on Letterman, and Princess is like, I got to carry this show now for 3 hours.
Yeah, hey, dog, have a good time on Letterman.
Yeah, exactly. Or, like, dog's busy out pushing his book or something. Mm-hmm. And, like, the other day, they had Joe Girardi on, and Mad Dog wasn't there because he apparently went out on, like, a book tour or something, or had some, you know, an appearance somewhere.
Right.
So Joe Girardi jokingly said, and I didn't know there was any, this is before I read about the controversy, and Joe Girardi's like, hey, do you ever get a day off to go golfing, Mike, or anything, or is it just a Mad Dog? And Princess is like, no, it's just Mad Dog. Somebody's got to be here to keep the show going. And I thought it was just, like, kind of kidding around, but now looking back, well, you know, I'm like, geez, maybe that wasn't, like, so comical or funny or, like, good-natured, you know?
Well, you know what's weird is that they're being simulcast on the Yes Network.
Right.
So it's not like we can see, like, Mad Dog, like, just visibly disgusted by something Mike said because he knows we could see that. Although, on the other hand, it kind of would be great if they had, like, you know, some sort of on-air screaming match or something.
I mean, they always yell at each other because they differ about things. They're like, you know, Mad Dog hates the Yankees, Mike likes the Yankees, etc. But you can't see that, like, being carried over as to, like, who was a better quarterback, Bart Starr or Johnny Unitas. Like, they argue about that. They don't speak for 3 days. You know, I can't possibly believe that it would lead to that, but maybe.
Do you think Mike goes to his therapist and he's just like, after 19 years, I hear that laugh. I hear his laugh when I'm trying to sleep. I just hear that cackle and I close my eyes and I just can't get away from it. I'm sorry, Doc.
Yeah, like a Sopranos thing. Yeah.
And Mad Dog's like, hey, he just doesn't respect me. He does not respect my opinion. And that's the bottom line.
The thing I couldn't believe is when I read the article online in New York Newsday, and then they have a comment section, and the level of vitriol of the commenters about how awful Mike and the Mad Dog are. I mean, there's no gun to your head that makes you listen to the show, folks, you know? All these people, I mean, I think that's like somewhat the nature of the internet. Like, commenters just get on and, like, I hate everything. I hate this. I hate that.
They're like hecklers at a basketball game.
Exactly, but everybody was absolutely just murdering them, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, geez, this is unbelievable. How can they have, like, the #1 show in New York, probably in the country, sports-wise, and everybody's, like, killing them, you know?
Well, you know, I was just watching Private Parts on HDNet, which is a movie that still holds up pretty well, but it's also really funny now because the whole movie is basically the final thought of the movie is like, well, I love my wife, and then they got divorced like 5 years later. So it's a little just weird to watch in retrospect. But there's one part when the guy played by Paul Giamatti, Pigmouth, they're going over the ratings with them. They're like, the average listener listens 18 minutes a day, but for Stern, the average listener listens an hour and 10 minutes a day. And then they were like, the people that hate Stern, they listen to him for 2 hours a day. And the guy's like, what? How does that make sense? And they were like, well, they hate him and they want to see what he says next.
God.
So maybe that's what happens.
That's why, I guess, you know, there was a time when the more controversial you were, the better. Now I guess it's sort of the opposite. But
well, I remember being in Boston listening to the insufferable Big Show and listening to it even though I hated it. And that happened for, like, you know, 3-4 straight years. And then finally I was like, why am I listening to a show that I hate when I could just be listening to music? So, yeah.
I used to enjoy listening to that show when the Red Sox, like pre-2004, when the Red Sox were bad, because those guys were your typical, like, we're awful, the Red Sox are all bums, and so I got a rise out of that listening to it. But now I can't listen to it because they're like, you know, Belichick's on, and it's like a full-body massage for Belichick. I can't listen to that. And now the Boston
Danny
Trampler
Ainge,
is too
same
much.
thing.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that, you know, I don't really know what I'm in a weird place as a sports fan right now. You know what my dream is? My dream is for I want now my new sports dream is for either the Olympic hockey team or the Olympic basketball team to be made up of all college guys and somehow win the gold medal.
Like in the old days?
Yeah, like in the old days. I think that's my new dream because you're not going to top beating the Lakers in a Game 6 by 39 points.
No, my God.
You're not going to top the way the Pats won the first Super Bowl, and you're not going to top the Red Sox-Yankee comeback.
No.
Literally all three impossible to top.
You really are. Like, it's amazing.
So, yeah, and I don't mean to sound, and believe me, I am very, very...
You should pinch yourself every day.
I do. I constantly think about it, and I'm very aware of the long-suffering fans from other cities who are in the same position that.
And I actually like the Celtics. I've always liked the Celtics from the time at age 6 I got a Dave Cowens autographed basketball.
Right.
Yet I found myself thinking when they were playing the Lakers, I'm like, I do like the Celtics, but Boston's won a little too much lately.
I know, it's terrible. I was saying to somebody today, if we had spaced it out by a couple of years, then. But to have it all happen at once was it's unprecedented. ESPN
has this Titletown thing now that they're talking about.
I don't support that.
And it's I'm not quite sure what the parameters of it are, but how does Boston not win? They've won 3 Super Bowls, 2 World Series, and an NBA championship in the last 6 years. Is there any debate?
I will say that it's for people that hope that their city can replicate what happened with Boston. They should look at the real reasons why it happened. We had 3 good owners that spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
And hired smart people. And it's really not rocket science what happened in each situation. The Crafts poured a lot of money into the team and went out and got Belichick. The Red Sox finally figured out how to turn Fenway Park into a money machine. They hired Theo Epstein. They just spent an ungodly amount of money. And then the Celtics, they went over the luxury tax of the KG trade.
Right.
And those were all things that I'm not sure a lot of teams would have done.
Right.
So, it's not like it can't be replicated by Detroit or Philly or Chicago or whoever.
Right. No, it's true. You need to find someone like Kevin McHale that's willing to trade their best player for 14 cents on the dollar. But
well, it does. I'm not going to lie. It does help when you have a guy who is one of the greatest players in your franchise now being an inept GM on another team.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt. That's for sure. That helps.
That will help the cause. But so anyway, that's my new thing. I think I want Olympics, amateur athletes in the Olympics, and then hopefully the 1980 Olympic hockey team could be recreated.
Yeah.
It's my new sports dream.
That's good. That's a good one.
Because what's going to happen is, and it's not like I stopped watching sports as much because I still love the Red Sox and I love all my teams. I'm going to watch as much, but I'm going to turn into one of those overbearing dads with my kids. I'm going to end up going to all their games and just being a butthead.
Screaming at the ref, Dennis Hopper and Hoosiers.
You see me pulled out of an 8-year-old soccer game because I took a punch at a linesman.
You're going to be like the father in the Bad News Bears or whatever.
Yeah.
Guy, didn't he hit his kid or something when he gave up a hit?
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, though, for the long-suffering fans that are out there.
Yeah.
This
means you, Philly.
Well, Philly, I think the Cubs.
Sure.
I mean, you go, there's the Bills, there's 25 fan bases.
Oh, yeah.
We're in the same position that the Boston fans were in 2002. And the thing is, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And not just that, but it's even better than you would think it would be. So I would say that, you're actually in a cool place because you have the potential of something fantastic happening.
If the Cubs were ever to win the World Series, they're more lovable losers than the Red Sox ever were.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I can't even fathom how overbearing and how over the top that's going to be when they win.
Yeah, I'd be happy for them, though. You wouldn't be happy for them?
I would, actually, yeah. I'd be more happy for them than the Red Sox, certainly, who I was hoping would go another 86 years at least.
I know. I think the Red Sox kind of kicked the door down, and now it actually seems conceivable that the Cubs could win the World Series or the Bills. True. Actually, the Bills winning a Super Bowl, I think, is probably the least conceivable.
That's probably more of a long shot, yeah.
Because it's just wow, that team is jinxed. But
yeah, I would probably root for the Cubs, assuming they weren't playing the Yankees, which is probably a safe assumption this year. I was saying the other day that my dream is when you and I hit it big with these podcasts, and I pool all my money, that I'm going to buy a hockey team, any hockey team, and I'm going to move them back to Hartford.
You'd be a hero.
Which will then lead to my being named governor by acclamation, basically, of Connecticut. And I also had the great plan that I'm also going to bring in a AAA baseball team to Hartford. I think that would be good for Hartford.
I like it.
And I'm not crazy enough to think that we could ever get a Major League Baseball team. Mind you, that's the only part of this plan that I feel is implausible.
Right.
My owning a hockey team and being the governor, that's completely plausible. The only implausible thing would be trying to bring a Major League team here, but so I'm willing to settle for a AAA team.
Right.
But I think that would be really fun to own a hockey team and then own a AAA team. And then if we were successful enough, maybe you could lure an NBA team, like the Brooklyn Nets. Maybe they're not crazy about Brooklyn. Attendance is down,
I think
I could hang with Jay-Z. It would be good.
I think mayor is more realistic for you than governor.
You think?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I brought the Whalers back, mayor's a layup. The problem with that is I don't actually live in Hartford right now, so I couldn't be the mayor. That's why, governor, come on.
Yeah, but you
don't think all of Connecticut would be fired up about having like a Stanley Cup champion here?
But if you had all that money to buy the team, wouldn't you get a second place in Hartford so you can be eligible to be the mayor?
That wouldn't be a problem, I guess. But I'd rather be the governor.
I don't know. There's something funny you being, you'd walk in a room, they'd be like, the mayor of Hartford, John O'Connell, and everybody would applause. I don't know, Governor O'Connell. I guess it does sound a little bit more.
You think that's a little too serious for me, you think?
You're more of a mayor type.
All right.
You're more. Mayors, like, nobody really knows what they do. They just come in and tell stories.
That could be kind of great.
They drink every night. It's kind of in your wheelhouse.
Pretty much, yeah, that'd be good. That could be fun to be the mayor, sure.
I don't think out of all the things you laid out, I think the most realistic is Hartford getting a AAA team.
Yeah, they should.
They should have a AAA team.
Actually realistic. It'd be perfect for it, People would really, if we could ever get a AAA team for either the Red Sox, Yankees, or Mets, it would be huge. Red Sox, Yankees, obviously, would be enormous.
The Red Sox are locked into Pawtucket. I think the Yankees could be a little more realistic, though, right?
Yeah, they're in Trenton. Trenton Yankees. Oh, no, they're in Scranton Wilkes-Barre. I'm sorry, Scranton.
Yeah, that
Wilkes-Barre.
doesn't make sense.
No sense at all.
But do you have a baseball stadium?
What's that?
Do you have a baseball stadium?
No, this is a minor problem. We have the Yukon football stadium. That's actually too big, though.
How hard could it be to build? I mean, if
you need like a 25,000 seat stadium for AAA, right?
Yeah, but if Lowell could build one, then Hartford could build one.
Absolutely.
I think
the problem is that there's the Twins AA team, the New Britain Rockettes is in New Britain, and they always claimed like it was their like territory when Hartford had visions of getting a AAA team or a AA team, but they were like, we own the market. So, but I think if you were upgrading it to a AAA team, I think that would like trump the AA market, certainly,
Well, the other thing
which is why they would fight it.
You could just go to war with them, like have an actual war.
An actual war with Hartford, New Britain.
Yeah, just send all the Hartford people over to fight with New Britain.
All right, that's what we could do.
Let me tell you something. If the town of New Britain, which is really a town and not even a city, thinks that it's in everybody's best interest for them to block Hartford having a AAA team because they have a AA team, that's ridiculous.
Now, see, if I was the mayor, I could certainly advocate the war between Hartford and New Britain, but as the governor, I kind of have to embrace all the towns of Connecticut. So
That's true.
Torn.
Yeah, that is true.
I'm torn here.
Well, you know what? I need new sports dreams, and now one of my sports dreams is for
Hartford to get a AAA team?
Yeah, for Hartford to get a AAA team and for them to play on John O'Connell Way. I think would be two of the greatest things that happened.
Didn't they name like the Padres when they had Jack Murphy Stadium? Wasn't he like a sports writer and he advocated for the Padres? I mean, San Diego getting a major league team.
Yeah.
I think that's why they called it Jack Murphy Stadium. So maybe they could call it, JackO Stadium here in Hartford.
Well, I love the fact that we have a Yawkey Way.
Right.
At Fenway.
For the bitter racist cheap owner.
Guy told Willie Mays to get off the field, or whatever that story was.
Yeah, exactly.
We had one black guy every year for when I was a kid. Yeah. Hey, let's name a street after him.
They had their first black player in like 1979. Yeah.
We had Pumpsy Green. We were the last team that had a black guy. And then I think they only allowed like one or two each year.
Wasn't it literally like in 1958, like 10 years after Jackie Robinson?
Oh, it was like it was either 58 or 59. It was like 12 years after, I think. Yeah, it is not a good history. No. And unfortunately, people still tie Boston into that stuff today when, you have Kevin Garnett's probably or Paul Pierce are as popular as anybody right now.
And the Celtics were the first team to start 5 African Americans, I believe, right?
Yeah, back in the 60s.
Right.
Well, that was another weird thing about the Celtics thing that I didn't even pick up on the whole year, which was that every key guy in the team in the 10-man rotation was black.
Yeah.
It was something that nobody ever made a big deal out of. It just kind of happened. So I thought for Boston that was some good progress.
Yeah, everybody has wearing Garnett jerseys and Pierce jerseys.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, as early as as late as the early 90s, you had the D. Brown Wellesley situation. And
yeah.
But I think the racist tag is just out the window.
And Ortiz and Manny are hugely popular.
Yeah, Ortiz and Manny. I mean, all the Patriots, it's stupid, but,
yeah.
Anyway.
What can you do?
Well, I don't know how we got on that subject.
I don't know.
I'm going to let you go.
This is a serious podcast.
Really was. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a smoking jacket on. I'm going to have a cigar and a glass of wine and think about everything that happened.
That's fantastic. That's good.
I'm glad we worked this out for Mike and the dog.
Let's hope so.
I'm sure they're not listening, and I'm sure they don't even have email addresses.
Or understand what a podcast is.
Or understand what a podcast is, but we are rooting for you guys to get back together. Absolutely. I do not want to have a second wife for the dog and a second wife for Mike would be a disaster.
A step host, right? We don't want that.
A step host, that would be terrible.
So we don't want that at all.
All right, keep your fingers crossed.
I don't want to.
I'll talk to you soon.
Excellent. Take care.
Target % off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
Honda Pilot Ride Ready Radio presents Driving with Chris Berman.
Back, gone! Whoop, whoop! Rumbling, bumbling, stumbling! Whoop! That's why they play the game. Whoop, whoop!
What's wrong with Berman?
I don't know. He's been like this since I picked him up.
It's good you have third row seating. You can put him back there, away from your ears.
It does help.
With enhanced third row seating, you'll be ready for almost anything, including Chris Berman. Ride ready in the all-new Pilot, pilot.honda.com.